This is what we'd like to do. If you've got your Bibles with you, it's a great time to pull those out. If you don't have your Bibles with you, we really want you to have a Bible in front of you or next to you today. So if you need one, just throw your hands up, and we will give one of those to you. And so if you're not next to somebody that you can read one, that's great. But we want to make sure you have one open. And we're in the book of Revelation. Woo! We've been going through Revelation since September, and we're only halfway done. Woo! But anyways, it's our intention and desire here that we would work through a book that's called expository walking through. So there's some passages that are we hear a lot and in books, and you're like, yes, and other passages might feel sometimes like, I've never heard that before. It's our desire to walk through a book and understand it, we hope, in a full way. And we're in the book of Revelation today. Revelation actually beginning in verse 13, right in the middle. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to begin with a few comments up front so we're kind of aware. We're going to walk through 13 and 14 today, okay? And I wanted to make sure that we're attentive to one of the major themes throughout this book and actually in this section, chapter 13 and 14, is actually being aware of posers. Posers is a word, as a youth pastor, I used to say when someone was being something they really weren't. They were out front. Their out front looked different than what was really going on. As a youth pastor, I would work with students, and there would be times, literally, within about a year, that they would begin the year and they would be a jock or a person that was very sporty. So they'd have sport clothes on, wearing it all the time. And then about, I don't know, October maybe, all of a sudden there was a swing, and all of a sudden they went country. True story. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay, cowboy boots and cowboy hat. Cool, okay, I guess that's okay. So, and then about January after that, after Christmas or so, then all of a sudden they're hip-hop, right? All of a sudden it's like, whoa, the pants dropped the long ways, the hat jacked to the side, and there's a walk going on now, right? What is that? And oftentimes, just psychologically, students working out who I am and stuff. It's cool, we all do it at different times. But I remember watching that, and a term, oftentimes, I don't know if they still use it, I'm a little outdated, a little bit my shelf life of youth pastor was 10 years ago, but used to say poser a lot, right? You're a poser. You're trying to be someone that you're not. That's a poser. It's a fake. It's something that's not true. We're going to be looking, actually, today at a couple posers, because really the heart of these chapters, chapter 12 all the way to 19, is a worship war. Who will have your heart? Who will have your allegiance? Because we all order our lives around someone or something. All of us. Maybe even ourselves. But it's still ordered that way. In this passage, in the middle of this, chapter 13, in coordination with chapter 12, and moving into 14, speak to the allegiance. Who will you worship? Because we all worship someone. Have you seen that movie, Catch Me If You Can? Remember that movie? What a great movie. I love that. We actually own that one, right? Do you remember who the character, based on a true story, this young man, who basically was able to steal millions of dollars being a poser as a Pan Am pilot. Remember that? And then he switched and moved, and then he was after that, he became a doctor. Remember? And then at the end, I mean, one of the parts also, he was a lawyer. He crammed and passed the bar exam in Louisiana. I think they had weird laws at that point there. And by the time he was 19 years old, he had conned millions of dollars away from businesses and people by check washing and things like that. I remember watching that. Sometimes we're intrigued by that. Wow, how can someone do that so persuasively? How can so many people be so deceived by that poser? Revelation is trying to wake us up. The book of Revelation is trying to give us the revelation and the reality of who Jesus is and his activity now. It takes us out of our own present situation, which is extremely hard to get out of sometimes because we're here, we're living in this, and it broadens us up. It takes us higher. It gives us a greater view. So today, I'm preaching from another perspective. And if it breaks, this will be a viral video on YouTube. All right, everybody's got their Bibles ready? We've got 5 windows we're going to go through. 5 windows from a different perspective we're going to look at. Let's put our noses down and look at this first window from right here. First window is the first paragraph or two of chapter 13, the first beast of the sea. Let me read this section and then we'll go through it. Revelation 13:1 begins this way. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its head. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it, the dragon gave his power, his throne, and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. The whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven, and it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. All who dwell on the earth earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundations of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he will go. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must they be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Window 1. If we were to look back the chapter earlier, chapter 12, we would see another great story. Another story that's trying to symbolically give image to what's going on. This cosmic battle that's going on. It was a cosmic Christmas if you were here 3 weeks ago. What happens is a dragon is ready to go against anything that God so poses and begins to move forward. And so this dragon is fighting. There's war in heaven, and all of a sudden he's cast to the earth. And this dragon is desiring to stop the birth of this child. But the child's born. And the child conquers and goes to heaven, and war is now made against his offspring. So the first image in chapter 12 is a dragon, who is obviously, it's the same word, Satan, the deceiver, the evil one. That is Satan. But now we see, in this next chapter, a beast of the sea that rises out of the sea. If we look at actually this, we would see that in reality, there are many parallels between the description of this beast in chapter 13 and that of Christ elsewhere throughout the book of Revelation. Look at these, for instance. Both the beast and Christ have swords. They both have followers who have their names written on their foreheads. They both have horns. They both are slain. They both rise to new life and are given authority. They both have authority over every tribe and nation and tongue and people, and they both receive universal worship. They show that the beast is set up as the supreme enemy of Christ and his people. The only figure who fits the description of the beast is the devil himself, as he repeatedly works through his chosen agents throughout history. You're going, okay, Art, so what? What's happening like a mob, where the mob boss is in the dark shadows? This is the first window. We're looking through this lens where the evil one, being the dragon, is actually using systems and things that are in place. If you're a first century hearer of this, you're probably looking to the Roman government and saying, look at how the evil one is using these systems and things in place for his own purposes. If you're in our time, you're looking at other systems that are in place that the evil one uses, he influences. And this window is to encourage the Christians who are suffering underneath this to stand strong, to endure, to continue to have faith. This first window of the beast is a poser. He's posing to have authority and to have worship to him. We're going to see the next beast, which actually is another poser, will actually complete the unholy trinity. See, everything in the book of Revelation God does and the evil one mimics. He keeps mimicking. He keeps bringing things alongside. He keeps trying to do things that are false to deceive those who follow Jesus. And I want to encourage you today that if you are following Jesus Christ, you're not one that is marked with these numbers we're going to see in a little while. We're not marked on our forehead and our hand, which is figurative. We're all marked. Soon we're going to see that this beast and the other beast with him, that this is an order of life. And who are you worshiping is really the question that this whole passage talks about. It's a battle for your soul. Who will you order your life around? And these believers are being persecuted and crushed, they feel. And these young believers needed this window. The first window to see, unveiling truly what these powers are. The first window is the window of the beast of the sea. But if you put your noses down, there's another window. There's another window. The second window is the beast of the earth. Let's put our noses down, because this is where you may have heard some Revelation things, and you may have gotten scared. And many of you know the reason we're walking through Revelation this year is intentionally because my heart is that you are not scared when you read this book. That we have some tools to be able to go into it and be encouraged as disciples of Jesus. This book is about discipleship. It's not an end times timetable. How are we going to live now? Let's look in chapter 13, verses 11. Some of this is going to be common to you probably, or familiar to you. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb. We've seen this already, mimicking. And it spoke like a dragon, though. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its present, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, who are basically those who are not following the Lamb. Telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. It was allowed to give allowed to give breath. That was crazy. Allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And it causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, slave and free, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy, sell, unless he has this mark. That is the name of the beast, or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, or of humanity. There's another way to translate that. And his number is 666. I remember, maybe you were around, I remember hearing this. I still have a book that kind of proposes this, that the end of the world would be 1984. The late great planet Earth. If you guys were around during that time, you probably were scared to death, huh? Hopefully you're not scared, because followers of Jesus don't want to be scared, but it brought lots of fear. I have that book. I got it for like $0.25 right now. Because 1984 was going to be the end. And it wasn't. So then 1988 was the end, and then it wasn't. And what I'm trying to say is that some of these passages that you have just read here, you've been taught maybe, or maybe even as you read them through the lens that you may have inherited, that all of a sudden this 666 is going to be a literal mark that you're going to have on your forehead and on your hands. That these things are going to you're going to be deceived by the evil one, and you're going to be cast away, and I don't want to be like that, God, but I'm nervous of anything like that. I remember hearing that a barcode was going to be slipped underneath your hand, and you're going to have retina searches or something on your forehead or something like this. All these ideas, because they're trying to take a passage and make it literal when God is intentionally trying to make it figurative. He's speaking to what we do, what we think, and what we do. God has already marked his people in this book twice on their foreheads already. God did it first. Guess who did it second? the evil one, right? We're mimicking. He's mimicking. There's mimicking going on all the time throughout the book of Revelation. And that's what John is trying to communicate. That lurking below the shadows, there is evil force there. And that the evil one will be behind the forces of both the first window of the beast of the sea and the second window, the beast of the land. They're basically puppet leaders that he is using. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the evil forces that exist in this broken world. But yet we are following Jesus Christ, and we know that we have already conquered. The window of the first window we see is the window that is the beast. The second one, the beast of the sea. The second one is the beast of the land. And this mark is not something, please hear me, is not something you need to be scared as followers of Jesus you're going to have. If you're following Jesus Christ, you're already marked. You're mine, and I love you. And that's what we need to hear. If you want to talk more about this, there's so much in this passage, guys. There's so much overlaying stuff of Old Testament. I would love to talk to you individually about this if you want to. Or do a short study if you want to. But we're going to continue to move on because there's a bigger theme of this is who's your heart going to worship? Okay, so let's move on to 14. Okay? This is one I love. Okay? I didn't fall through. I don't think. Yeah, kind of, here we go, okay. It's a little shaky up here, though, okay? Yeah, it is a little shaky up here. I've never been more conscious of my weight, but anyways, I'm just playing. Okay, here we go. Okay, Revelation 14, let's put our noses down, okay? Let's put our noses down and read this. Just a couple verses, first 5 verses. Then I looked, right? And behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000, who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters and like the sound of a loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they were singing a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and before the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. And it is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed for mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. And in their mouth no lie was found, for they're blameless. Okay. Now, I want to ask a question. How many of you have been in the military? Raise your hand up high. What are some things as a person that is in the military that you put yourself under because you were part of that army? Just yell those out. What? Who's in charge? So you've got definitely a superior, right? Obviously, you are in a hierarchical charge, right? Whoever's above you. Salute the stripes, right? Okay? Good. What else? You have to go with the flow, right? Right? Are you your own? If you get a sunburn, do you get in trouble? I've heard. You do, right? And what do they tell you? They own you, right? Right? I know very few people in the military who have not had to leave their homes for an extended amount of time, whether it's going to a deployment or something like that, right? You left your home and you had to go do something and then come back. The Old Testament had a similar way when they had military, people were called up for the military. Do you remember the story with David and Bathsheba in the Old Testament, remember? Right? When kings go off to war, David didn't go, and he hung out at home, right? And all these other people, these military people were out. Most of them at this point were men. Not that the army of God is only men. But in this scenario, the imagery of army is being brought up. I'll bring that in a second. But these people, when you were part of an Israelite army, when you were in battle and you were during that time, you did not go home. And you did not go home to be with your wife, if you know what I mean. That's why Uriah slept he would not go and be with his wife during that time because he was called up for duty. And they did not do that during that time. If we read this and we think, what are you talking about? Defiled themselves. What? Women? Are the monks right? Are they the only ones that are going to get in heaven? You know, I'm just kidding. I mean, but you're thinking, what is this all about? It's imagery. This is imagery again. The 144,000 we learned earlier, are 12,000 from every tribe. When in the scriptures, if you look through the scriptures, when that happens, that is called up for a census, and it's usually to prepare for war and battle. I need to know how many fighting people we have. If you go through the book of Numbers, both sides of it has those things. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000. From the tribe of Ephraim, and it's never even. It's always like, 34,205. You know what I mean? All these, it's actually specific. These are called up for an army to do a purpose. And so when you hear the words 144,000 in the book of Revelation, it's speaking about this perfect army of God. It's not saying 144,000, 144,001, you're out. It's not that. It's not what it's saying. Numbers are not specific in Revelation. They have imagery to them. 7, fullness. 3, fullness. 6, incompleteness. You hear these words. And so as I get to this window, this third window, we see that here, these people of God who have not defiled themselves, who have not distracted themselves with other things that are outside the mission, both married and unmarried, that are following Jesus, this army that's totally dedicated in allegiance, they are worshiping the one and have their foreheads marked. These people need to know, the hearers of this first book need to be encouraged that in light of those two earlier windows of the evil one who is behind the puppets of the beast of the sea and the beast of the earth, those two, that God had not abandoned them. That as they were away from all those things, that God had not abandoned them. That they were marked. That their opposition to those things was His will for their life. Even to the point of death. We read that earlier. To those who go to captivity, they go to captivity. To those who die by the sword, they die by the sword. He's speaking to everyone there. Those are same words out of Jeremiah. When some of the faithful people would go and be deported. Suffering happens as we're followers of Jesus. Jesus does not do, if you do a great life and do a great life, you're not going to suffer at all. Actually, sometimes it's actually the opposite of that. And this window shows us that although they are under immense pressure, this window shows us that actually they're standing with God. They're standing with the Lamb as an army, 144,000 who are marked by God, ready for mission. The last two sections have to do with three angels that communicate and they speak of the eternal gospel, is what it says. They say, they're proclaiming this to every tribe and nation. They say, fear God and give Him glory because the hour of His judgment has come, and worship Him who made the heavens and earth and sea and the springs of water. Another angel proclaims that Babylon has fallen. Babylon doesn't exist at this point, you guys. He's speaking about any countries or anything that exists that stand opposed to God. It's going to fall, and it is falling. And he speaks to Babylon at this point. Verse 6 says, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all the nations drink the wine of her passion with her sexual morality. Justice and judgment is coming. They're under immense amount of pressure right now. But they're encouraged to stand strong and be faithful to the end. Endure to the end. And the third angel calls them and says, if anyone worships this beast or its image and receives this mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath. He's speaking to them, saying that if they order and align their lives out of anything else outside of God, the one that's revealed Himself, that there is consequences for that. Even though in this life they may, in certain situations, have it easier. And so he's encouraging and speaking to these people that are trying, desiring to follow God with all their heart, to be encouraged, to know that truly God is in control, and that He desires worship from them and them alone, their hearts. And then we have the last one, which is verse 14 of 14. It says this, and then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like the Son of Man with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe. So he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped, an image of harvest. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, and the angel who had the authority over the fire, and he called out in a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, "Put in your sickle and gather the cluster from the vines of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trotted outside the city. Blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bride, 1,600 stadia. Guys, this is graphic imagery. This is graphic imagery. And what we spoke is that oftentimes when God communicates truth and he delivers his people, it's the same type of thing where there is both redemption and judgment in the same act. We spoke about the Old Testament where Moses was in part of God delivering his people, and in the same act of delivering them through the ocean or through the sea, as they went through the sea, the chariots followed, the Egyptian chariots followed in Exodus, and they were taken over. The same action of redemption was the other side of the coin was judgment. And that's what's happening through this book. And we may not like hearing the word judgment very often. We don't like hearing those words. But yet, through this section, where the worship war is going on, in this section, we're seeing very clearly that God is desiring worship alone from them. And that they're under immense amount of stress to sell out. They're under immense amount of stress just to sell out. I know that from history, these people that were hearing this the first time were under pressure to give incense to Caesar and say these simple words, "Caesar is Lord," and just do a drop of incense, and they would be fine. If they did that, if they bowed down, if they sold out, they would be okay. And there was a great amount of temptation to do that. And Jesus says no. The Lamb says no. We don't sell out that way. No. He's saying, you stand strong with me, although things around you may not be all that you see. I need to take you up and help you understand what's truly going on. That from this view, it makes more sense. That God is in control, that God is just, and that the things that are happening in this world are moving toward an ultimate end, toward good. God desires that both you and me worship him alone. I was thinking about through the first century person that would possibly lose their house and lose their livelihood if they chose to worship God alone. And then I thought about us. I thought about where are we now. I mean, this seems so distant from us. That's actually why you don't hear Revelation very often spoken. I'm actually still here. Just kidding. Yeah. Trapdoor. No. But we don't hear that spoken very often. We just don't. But partly it's because I think it's hard to interpret. What do we do with this, Artie? Thanks for doing a great historical lesson for me. Thanks for trying to interpret the comics for me. But what do I do with it? What do you do with it? This is three things I think we do. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. God is in control. And maybe you need to hear that more than anything else today. Maybe these windows weren't helpful for you, but maybe those words are. Do not be afraid. God is in control. He is. Another one is that God and the Lamb are full of justice and full of grace and are the only ones worthy to be worshipped. Where is your heart worshiping today? What is your life ordering itself around? I was sitting with this one. And I think when I was younger, I used to think that by this age, I would be, Michael Scott used to seek that by the time he was 40, he thought he'd be a millionaire. I don't know if you know who that is, but anyways, it's from The Office. But anyways, but I joke, I laugh about that a lot because I'm like, so many people, and when we're younger, we think we're going to be something, and really we get to those certain ages, you hit 30, and you hit 40, and you hit 50, and you hit 60, and you're like, seriously? Really? Really thought, it's kind of going backwards, I think, a little bit, whatever, right? Maybe you've been there, right? When I look at that and I think about that, I'm reminded that we can't write our story, but God's writing it. And if we worship Him alone, He will be the one that writes that beautiful story. These people didn't write their own story. It was being written by God. But worshiping Him alone was their call of their heart. And I know that thinking about this, I thought by the time I was a certain age, I may have been invested in certain things and done these things. But as I thought about investments, this is where I think, one area I think actually, where we might unintentionally be bringing ourselves in with the evil one. I don't know if you know where your investments are going into, but much of the investment world, some of it, is actually on things that we would not be ethically for. And in some way and somehow, whether we know that many of the working situations around the world that are not up to our even basic standards, in some way, in other forms, by investing in some of the countries that contribute to that, we are working with them and perpetuating that. I was sitting and thinking about this. What's this mean for my life now? How do I worship God? In the things in which I might bring myself alongside. I got to tell you, there's certain things that I believe God's out in the world and I go look for Him, but there's times when there's things and I just don't want to be partnered with. I don't want to be connected with. That's not out of a holier than thou posture. It's out of a I want to love and serve God posture. And you too, as you're thinking through your life, what are the things that you're participated, involved in? What are those things? Those things actually are how we order our lives toward worship. I'm going to say the last one before I fall. Okay. The last one is this. Here's a call for the endurance of the faith of the saints. He says that twice. Here's a call. The whole purpose of this, if we're scared or we're confused, the purpose of this is primarily that we would have endurance and faith, continued action of faith in the midst of trial. And so I don't know if you're in the midst of trial right now, but if you ever are, or you feel overwhelmed, this is a place to turn, not to be scared out of our wits that a real dragon's going to eat us, but to know that there's evil forces at play and that we stand as one who worships God alone. I'm going to try to come down now. Oh, thanks, you're there. Okay, good. Thanks, bro. Thanks. Thanks. For him. Anyways, this is a lot of scripture, and I might need to get a chance to sit with you afterward. Seriously, there's hours and hours of study behind this, and I've had to cut so much just to have this one idea together. I'd love to talk to you more if you may have been taught other things, but if you walk away from here and don't know that this worship war is for your soul, that He's trying to encourage you to be faithful in every situation you are in, we'll miss what it's being said. And if you get that, you will receive and you will be encouraged in the place you're at right now to follow through with what God wants you to do. Okay. Let's respond in song.